As you can imagine, my relationship with my mother has had its ups and downs. I would describe it as a typical relationship with mental illness for Flair. She will always persist I get married, and she will never admit she needs me. She is always right about everything, and everything must be done her way. Not a compromising bone in her body. Sounds like all the Catos that I can't get along with. One thing I found very interesting about the probate court was that the fact that these lawyers are entrusted to have total control over another human being and not having any other agency check on the well-being of this vulnerable population. Now, when it comes to big transitions, such as selling my mother's home, the courts did bring a third-party lawyer, one that just got to know her by only visiting her once, maybe twice. The report holds so much weight, I couldn't believe that the probate court system thinks the shallow of a reporting system means they are adequately qualified to know my mother more than I do when it comes to what she really needs and or wants. This is truly absurd and ridiculous. So when you ask my mother, do you want your daughter to take care of you? If you really knew my mother, she is a proud woman. And remember, she adopted me. So in her mind, she will always be my caretaker, not the other way around. What she does do is always ask me to come live with her at the assisted living facility, along with the boys. But the court system takes what they want to hear and don't want to be overly concerned by family drama or issues. This inevitably, however, creates more unnecessary trauma that didn't need to happen, such as removing a woman that actually didn't hurt herself or others and was taken out of her home because her guardian felt he lost control over her. A control that is very much like a dictatorship. The United States of America prides itself to be a democratic system, and its citizens usually want their politicians to be bipartisan so that both sides get a little of what they want. And as far as I know, a marriage usually consists of making compromises from both partners. So why is it that this judicial system thinks it is fine that a singular, unchecked power can rule over the health and wealth of an individual? This is why racism, classism, and prejudice of the elderly and mentally ill still persist. This system is a reason why blacks don't have inherited wealth. This is why black families are being destroyed in America. This is why the poor stay poor, and this oppressive system is made and built to keep them oppressed. It just makes for a recipe for corruption and abuse of power. This tyranny needs to stop. I am also a mother of a child with autism and have experienced being questioned about my intuitive suspicions of autism, which was insulting. Just because I didn't have a degree in early childhood doesn't mean you know my child more than I do. Just because he doesn't fit a textbook definition of whether or not he does make eye contact. But once he finally got the diagnosis that I had suspected for years, he also had a reinstated IEP, Individual Education Plan. This is where several people are at the table, from school counselors, therapists, and teachers. All these individuals talk out and plan out what is best for my child. This was something I would have hoped, if not have expected, for my own mother. Not judges and lawyers. Growing up with my mother made me realize one thing for sure about her mental illness. She was deeply traumatized during the civil rights era. She was extremely sensitive about her hair, and I recall she told me hurtful comments, even from family members, were made when it came to hair texture. As an Asian kid, all I could think about was, why did she have to tell me this on a daily basis? Because it really didn't concern me. Also remember, she was very much stuck in her past. So as an adult and as an activist, usually trying to speak upon the injustices in public housing or rent control from greedy developers, slumlord types, I usually leave race out of it. I bring up classism mostly. So when I tell you that when I was in the courtroom talking to the judge about my mother's house, and asking about her items, and asking why I couldn't be notified, I felt like I was sent back into slave times. Even if I didn't do a crime, the court system states I am innocent until proven guilty. However, because I wasn't granted guardianship and only listed as a person of interest on her case, as well as her only heir, I was being told that the courts are within their rights to withhold any information from me, and all in her best interest. Those are words they like to use a lot, which means I was being labeled as someone trying to take advantage of her and only seemed to care more about her assets than her. I also want to share why I care so much about her items. Besides the fact my own childhood was also trashed, my mother adopted me when she was 54 years old. She had a whole life before me. I literally grew up hearing stories of her French fiancé, her first true love of a poor Virginian doctor, and her many homes at faraway places. She had things in storage for most of my life. So I wonder why the heck the court system doesn't put in place an aging and plan for this population. But maybe they do and didn't share it with me. Why did everything have to be on an emergency basis? So I never got to see the full picture of my mother's history for myself through her lifetime of items. I even wanted to just go through her old computer and see her resume. But that new conservator and his inappropriate comments, such as where are all the jewels and bars of gold, or all I'm looking for is the Hope Diamond. If you can imagine, I get very triggered when I see a large rectangular dumpster in front of a row home in DC. So when I ask about her items to the judge, he just raised the bond. Of all the things I have done in my life, from running away from home to being a teen mom or getting a degree in graphic design or leaving my mod rehab housing, my only really big regret was I did not fight to keep my mother's home. But I was being hopeful still. Hopeful that somehow my mother's guardian would be a reasonable person and the courts. That somehow the money from my mom's home sale, along with the inevitable sale of the Ecuadorian property, could be used to buy another home for my mom. But what is sad about the whole situation, I have more hope that maybe I can change the laws because I can't change the minds of the people controlling my mother's life. Another reason these lawyers need to be held accountable, at this very moment, I am not entirely sure if my mother still owns the property in Ecuador. I don't trust, obviously, what the conservator tells me, and the neighbor in Ecuador believes the Ecuadorian government has given it to the squatter that has been on the property for several years. I've been told by the probate court resources department that if the courts were to lose the property, then none of them will be held liable because the property is in a foreign state. And so happens my mother's conservator isn't licensed in Ecuador. He can't be penalized for his incompetence. More unchecked authority and unchecked injustice, and all in the means of take advantage and exploitation to ruin poor Black families. Every day I have to live with the thought that my mother, along with our life together, will never be the same. What hurts most is my mother wasn't blessed with having several children of her own, like her brother and sister. She wanted a family so bad, she made me her family. And to have her own biological family rip her away from her home, her life items, and the people she loves the most, it should be criminal. This should be the shame America needs to recognize and be willing to redeem themselves with how they treat poorly towards the elderly, the mentally ill, the poor, and Black people living, surviving in an oppressive state granted by the greatest nation for white supremacy. I will never forget when the local news station reported about a stolen package that was filled with passed along Christmas ornaments. The reporter was pleading that the criminals return the items. That is the difference between white America and Black America. Whites know how to legally steal from you. White America thrives on criminalizing Black, making them pit against each other. White America is unethical, but spins it as if they aren't so bad or on the right side, when they are clearly wrong. ingeniously make privileged blacks their overseers. It is 2020, but still nothing has ever changed because no one truly wants to uplift black families. So I challenge white allies to learn how to champion without overstepping. Reparations should look like free family therapy, a guarantee that black wealth be inherited. Upkeeping a home to stay at a livable standard should be paid by the government to make sure if family chooses to stay in their home, they can. We talk about the greatest generation was the one that fought the Nazis. My adoptive father and my mother's brother served. These same men are cowards when it comes to doing the right thing, when it comes to my mother. These so-called men have no backbone, have no sense of what is right or wrong. Most people can rarely admit they are wrong and willing to correct their mistakes. This is what actual grown progressive people can do. The silence and inaction are the reasons why the earth is dying, why black lives are endangered, and women's reproductive rights are being controlled by men. Nothing changes because no one can admit or take a stance to make actual, genuine, meaningful change. Everyone is scared to speak up and make the bold moves to speak upon these most difficult conversations of racism, generational trauma, mental illness, and systematic oppressive schooling and housing.